Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm going to be checking out the Full Speed Leader 3. Now, for those of you who don't know, the original Full Speed Leader 120 was a really popular model, and it was really the first plug-and-fly brushless micro that got it all together in terms of its price and its features. And as well as that, Full Speed really broke the mold in a lot of ways compared to other companies out there with their innovation. So for example, the only components not built and designed by Full Speed on this copter are the camera and the props. And there's actually a lot of thought put into the design. So rather than throwing a bunch of components together and hoping that something sticks, they extensively fly, test, and tune while managing to keep their prices competitive. And they are also very active on social media, and they offer good customer service. So while I don't think there's anything particularly unique about the new Leader against the now flooded market, there's definitely something unique about this company, and it's that which makes them worth buying into over the rest. So let's take a look at this new model, which at the making of this video is a prototype, but it's pretty close to the finished product. This version is the Leader 3 SE, which you can get direct from them and have custom canopies and things like that, but it's also going to be available without the 3D printed parts. So it's a 3-inch brushless micro, but just like the original Leader 120, it's running a smaller motor setup than your average 3-inch model to get the weight down. So this one weighs 100 grams without a battery, which makes it around 40 grams lighter than the likes of the Diatone GTM3 and the Skyzone S140, but it's also about 20 grams heavier than a 2.5-inch setup. And the reason I mention that is because this is designed to run off a 2.5-inch prop as well as a 3-inch prop. So it's a little bit heavier because the arms are longer, and we also have this TPU printed pod, which I think weighed around 8 grams or something like that. Now, I really like the 3D printed part, and I'll personally be keeping it because the receiver antenna slots in there nicely, and the VTX antenna also slots in there and is in a nice position, and it also houses the buzzer and the LEDs at the back. And I know the Full Speed guys are big fans of turtle mode, so they've added this fin on the top to give it a better pivot point. But if you are really after losing some weight, then you can remove this 3D printed part, but you would also need to add a couple of standoffs in there because these side plates screw directly into the TPU. So the frame is a unibody and it's a squished X, and it's using 3mm carbon. Now, you are not given a battery mat, but instead they give you some Velcro. Now, I prefer a silicone mat myself because I hate adding Velcro to all of my batteries, but Velcro does do a better job. I guess, you know, I'm just lazy, so I've added my own mat here. You do get given a nice grippy Full Speed battery strap, and while I'm underneath you can see that there are 2 hex screws holding down the cowling as well, and there's actually a nut on the other side of that which is recessed into the casing. So even though it looks like this model would be hard to work on with all of this protection, it actually comes apart really easily and it's not fiddly to put back together. So the motors are a Full Speed branded 1106 4500 kV, which comes with the HQ 3x3 tri-blade. Now, you're only given one set of these props to keep the cost low, and it's designed to run off a 3 or a 4S battery between 550 milliamp and 650 milliamp. Now, at the making of this video, 4S is still in testing because 4500 kV is pushing the limits of this prop and motor combo. So really, it's going to take a fair few number of flights to see whether these motors can handle 4S in the long term. But I'm going to be testing all batteries, and I'm going to be checking out a 2.5-inch prop as well. So the ESCs are Fullspeed's own 28 amp B-Al-Hali-S D-Shot 600 4-in-1 ESC with a XT30 connector, so I have no doubt that the ESCs can handle the amp draw. In fact, they are a 28 amp continuous and 35 amp burst, so if anything's going to give up on 4S, I think it will be the motors before the ESCs. The flight controller is Fullspeed's own F4 with a 32 kHz capable gyro. However, I think they've got this one dialed in at 8K and 4K. It was fully set up in Betaflight. However, something important to note is that it has its own target, which at the moment can only be downloaded off Fullspeed's website. It comes with two PID profiles. The first one is for 3S and the second is for 4S. And there's just a couple of things that I've changed, such as the rates and the channel map. I've also bumped the digital idle up to 6%. Oh, and angle mode wasn't in there either. But the beeper was set up and turtle mode was set up, and I actually like their on-screen display placement, so I've left that the same. Oh, air mode wasn't in there for some reason either, so I've turned that on. And something else that's important to note is that it does only have one extra UART, which is already taken up by the VTX, but that is set up correctly as tramp. The flight controller is soft-mounted as well. So, onto the VTX, which again is Fullspeed's own design. It's a switching VTX up to 600 milliwatt, and it's using the tramp protocol, as I mentioned. It has a little button on the side, but of course I'll be using smart audio, so I'm not going to be messing around with buttons. The connector is a micro UFL, and I prefer an MMCX connector these days. But with the antenna being housed nicely in the mount, there's no tension on the connector to worry about. Now, this is a linear antenna, so you're going to want to be using something like a Menace Bandicoot patch antenna along with diversity to get the best results. Or you can get yourself an Axie or a Foxeer Lollipop antenna, and you can attach that to the UFL connector. By the way, you can buy these components separately, so they've sent me their VTX to try on another model, and I'll link to their website in the below. So next is the receiver, and again it's a Fullspeed's own design. This is a D8 FreeSky receiver with the RSSI outputting on one of the aux channels. Now, for some reason, the RSSI wasn't set up in the on-screen display, but that's an easy thing to add, of course. And the receiver powers up from the flight controller's USB port, so it's pretty easy to bind with the bind button accessible from the side here. They also have a FlySky receiver and a DSMX version as well. And lastly, we have the camera, which is the Cadex Micro F1 CMOS camera. It's the 4x3 NTSC version, and it's actually in the frame pretty tight. And mine came at an extreme angle, but if you loosen all of the screws on the side of the frame, then you can put the camera angle at pretty much any angle that you like. And I'm also told that there's going to be a 2.5-inch specific version of this as well, so definitely look out for that. So let's take a look at some DVR footage. So this first flight was done with the 3-inch props and a 550 milliamp 3S battery. And I think this is my favorite configuration with this model. Now, it's certainly not the most powerful configuration, especially by today's standards, but I found it the most enjoyable to fly. I didn't feel like I needed to make any changes to the tune. It flew really smooth despite it being a windy day. The VTX reception is really nice as well, with minimal breakup and minimal noise, and this is just on the 25 milliwatt setting, and I did do some tests with that. So out of the box, the VTX is actually locked to the 25 milliwatt setting, so if you change it to a higher setting, it just stays at that low setting, and you have to long press the button on the side for 20 seconds to unlock it. And I found that the 25 milliwatt setting was more like 9 milliwatt, and the 100 milliwatt setting was more like 50 milliwatt. This is using the old immersion power meter, by the way, rather than the new one, and that's because I tend to find the older meter is better at the higher values. So 600 milliwatts was showing over 500 milliwatts, so I'm pretty happy with those figures. And you know, the reception was really good even on the lower setting, so I don't see that as a problem. And if you really need the higher power, then this VTX has it. It also has temperature protection, so it'll reduce the power output if it overheats, which I thought was a nice touch. I think the weakest component in this package is the camera. Now, don't get me wrong, I think it's a good quality image and it deals with light handling pretty well, but I think it's just lacking a little bit of quality control compared to the Runcams and the Foxeers out there. And, you know, I suppose that's to be expected because it's a cheaper camera. For example, there is a smudge of dust on the sensor, which might not come out on YouTube, but it's there in the goggles. And you know, I've seen other people's footage of this camera and I can always spot a little bit of dirt. And there's also a white line at the bottom of the picture, which I think is the IR block, not quite lining up with the sensor. But, you know, despite those things, it does do the job. And, you know, you can unscrew the lens to clean the dirt off it, but really you have to take the entire camera apart to do that properly. And then you do risk even more dust getting in doing that. I don't know. It's not really a criticism of full speed, really, and you know, it's the only component that's not theirs. So next I had a go at the GemFan 2.5-inch prop on a 650 milliamp 4S battery, and this is where the Copter really came alive in terms of power. Now sadly my speed trap wouldn't pick anything up on the 2.5-inch prop. However, I would guess from my other speed runs in other videos that it's hitting around about 80 miles per hour on this setup. Now by this point the sun had set, so I could see how well this camera dealt with low light, and I would just say that it's okay, but as I say, if I was to switch anything out with this model, it would be the camera. So lastly, I thought I'd try the 3-inch prop on a 4S battery, and I left this combination till last because I knew it would be pushing these motors. And this time the speed meter did pick up a couple of readings and it confirmed what I was feeling through the sticks, really. The 3-inch prop doesn't perform as well as the 2.5-inch prop in terms of thrust, and I think that's because the 2.5-inch prop is a higher pitch, so it's a 25-40 against the 30-30. And, you know, because it's a smaller prop, it's also less demanding on the motors. And just as I feared, after a couple of runs, one of the back motors overheated and sadly it caught fire and started to smoke. Now, these are prototype motors, and Full Speed has advised me that since my version they have made a change to the motor and it should run a 4S fine on the 3-inch prop. But I think my conclusion will still be the same, that the smaller, higher pitched 2.5-inch prop is more suited for this motor, and anything else is literally just overkill. And actually my favourite setup to fly this model is still on 3S with the 3-inch prop, you know, despite it not being the most powerful setup. Now, of course, we do have further prop options, such as the Emax Babyhawk prop, and, you know, Full Speed is going to send me their updated motors. But really, I think getting this to work with a 3-inch prop and 4S is more about chasing numbers than actually appreciating that it's a fine package running on the 3-inch prop on a 3S battery. But for now, I will leave this story there and I'll link everything in the below. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.